Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast, where talk is all about the West. This episode is brought to you by Golden Wings Horseshoes and produced by Cowboy Spirit USA. Deadwood, South Dakota has many claims to fame. A gold rush, a fateful card game, an Emmy-winning TV series. Historian Bill Markley saddles up to the ranch to delve into the facts and fictions of this fascinating town.
Alan, good to see you. How are you?
Always glad to be here.
Always good to see you. Well, today, one of our absolute favorite guests, Bill Markley, is with us today. It's just always good to talk to Bill.
Well, he's a great historian and comes from a good part of the world, and so I'm just tickled to have him here today. He's just one of the best historians walking
absolutely.
Around. Yeah.
Well, today Bill's going to talk about Deadwood, South Dakota, and I always say there's sort of three iconic Western towns: Tombstone, Deadwood, and Dodge City.
I fully agree.
And they're kind of the ones. If I don't know whether it's deserved or not, but they're the ones. And Deadwood has a very colorful history, and Bill's the author of Wild Bill Hickok and Buffalo Bill Cody, Plainsmen of the Legendary West, Standoff at High Noon, and Old West Showdown. Longtime member of the Western Writers of America. Great group, the Western Writers. I love their magazine, and we talk to a lot of those members. He's an author. Bill's the author of a dozen books. He's been in films, including Dances with Wolves, participated in Civil War, Western frontier reenacting, and he and his wife live in Pierre, South Dakota. It's about 70 degrees and sunny here in Tucson. Bill, how is it in Pierre?
Ready to come down.
Well, I know you're coming, so I thought I'd sort of.
Yeah, actually, it's warming up. It's going to get up to maybe 50 today, so it's melting a lot of snow. And I'm coming down your way. And in fact, I'm going to stay at the White Stallion Sunday, March 3rd through the 7th. And
perfect.
Yeah, my wife and I were there last year, and we just loved it, and we want to come back. So you'll probably see us wandering around.
Well, good. We'll look forward to that.
Well, Bill, let's start with the gold rush that took place in the Black Hills. We want to hear some of your version of the gold rush.
Sure. It's kind of I think all history is interesting. And again, thank you for the plug this morning. I'll have to try to live up to that. But the area of the Black Hills, for those who may not be familiar with, it's in the western part of South Dakota and a little bit of Wyoming. It's interesting in that you have it's all prairie plains through there, but millions of years ago there was an upthrust in that area that created kind of like if you will, a bubble or a pimple on the earth. And over the years, it eroded away to leave the inside core, the granitic rock and metamorphic rock. And in those areas, in the metamorphic rock, is where gold and silver and other precious metals came to be in veins in that area. And so that's a little bit of the geology of the area. And originally, there was a variety of tribes were through that area, but by the time the settlers started coming through, the Lakota, Cheyenne were the principal tribes in that area. And through time, through the Oregon Trail going south through, following the North Platte through Nebraska and that sort of thing, the tribes came into contact with white settlers, and there was friction over the years, and leading eventually to Red Cloud's War, which took place in Wyoming. They didn't want people to follow the Bozeman Trail up into Montana, where gold had been found there, and so the federal government made a treaty with the tribes to create what was called the Great Sioux Reservation, which was everything in South Dakota. We call it West River. Anything west of the Missouri River is West River. Anything east of the Missouri is East River. It bisects the state in half. So anything West River in Dakota Territory at the time was part of the Great Sioux Reservation, and it extended out into Wyoming to the Bighorn Mountains. And so that was 1868, and no white people were allowed on the reservation at that time. So, and then the Black Hills are smack dab in the middle of the Great Sioux Reservation. So things went on, okay for a few years then, and then General Sheridan. Sherman and Sheridan, they get kind of confused. I get them confused sometimes, but
yeah, me too, actually.
But anyway, they decide to send an expedition into the Black Hills. The purpose on the outside was to find if there was a good place to establish a fort. But the thing is, if you think about it, why do you need a fort in the middle of an area that the tribes were supposed to have? So anyway, they found Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, based out of Fort Abraham Lincoln, which is now in North Dakota. It was all Dakota Territory at the time, north and south. They had Custer. I think he had roughly 1,000 men. The 7th Cavalry, and also infantry. And they had an expedition from Fort Abraham Lincoln into the Black Hills. So this was the first major expedition in that area. There'd been a couple little ones earlier on, but nothing had ever penetrated the hills. So they head to the Black Hills. He also took along newspaper reporters, botanists, photographer, 2 geologists, and 2 professional prospectors. And they got through the Black Hills, and they got to a stream called French Creek. And I'm sorry, this was in 1874. I probably didn't mention that, but it was in July 1874. And the prospectors found gold in French Creek. And they said, hey, pay dirt. This is paying quantities of placer gold. And it's kind of funny. The professional geologists are saying, no, there's not enough there. But the professional miners said, oh, no, there is. And, of course, a lot of the soldiers decide they're going to start panning for gold in the creek. And they had to eventually get out of there. But anyway, there was a scout named Lonesome Charlie Reynolds, and Custer sent him off to Fort Laramie with his official dispatches of what they had found. Well, the reporters also sent along dispatches with him, and all of a sudden, the newspapers are blaring across the country. The new El Dorado, gold in the Black Hills. And at the time, the country was in the midst of a depression. I think it was called the Panic of 1873. And so there was a lot of people out of work, people trying to figure out, what to do. And so that really started the gold rush to the Black Hills. And at first, the military tried to keep the prospectors out. They would go in and escort them out of the Black Hills. But eventually, in Washington, they just decided to, on the slide, not have anybody arrest anybody anymore and let them just go into the hills. So that's how things got started that way.
So they did the usual thing that the government did is give away some land and then take it back.
Yeah, basically. Well, yeah, basically. once, and this will probably be getting ahead of the story a little bit, but once there were so many prospectors in the Black Hills, they just felt there was no way to get them out of there, and they were, finding gold and shipping it back, and it was helping with the economy a little bit.
Was there enough gold there to really be a strike?
I'm sorry, what?
Was there enough gold there to really be called a gold strike? Or
yeah, yep. And I'll get into that a little bit. But just to follow up on the Indians, the Lakota and Dakota and the Cheyenne, the government tried to buy it from them, and basically buy it on the cheap. And the tribes knew that it was worth a lot more than what the federal government wanted to do that. Without getting into a lot of detail, to this day, there was never actually a deal to buy the Black Hills, and the money that the government set aside for the tribes is still in escrow, building up interest right now. So in a way, the tribes still do have a valid claim to the Black Hills at this point.
The money has been sitting in escrow since when?
Since I want to say 1876. Wow. So it's really been building up over the years.
Wow.
But to the tribes, you figure you've got a variety of, now today, a variety of tribes that claim to the Black Hills, and to get everybody in agreement to take the money or whatever, some want to and others say no, and so it's been a complicated affair since back then. So, but anyway, that's probably getting away from the story. But just to remember that they do have a valid claim to the Black Hills even today. So anyway, with the question, was it enough gold there? Yes. Along French Creek, it was placer mining, and there was a town called Custer that grew up there. This is in the southern part of the Black Hills. And from there, people started scouting and prospecting northward through the Black Hills, and got to an area. One area is called Hill City. It's in the central part of the hills, and they found a lot of gold there. Again, placer mining. And then in late, I would say December 1875, there was some prospectors that went along a creek called Whitewood Creek in the northern Black Hills, and they discovered there a large quantity of placer gold there. And from that point on, then Deadwood and a variety of other little towns, if you want to call them towns, sprang up along Whitewood Creek. And the reason it's called Deadwood is the location where the town Deadwood is. It was filled with dead wood, down trees and stuff. It was just pick up sticks, if you will, puzzle of trees through there. And so that's why it got the name Deadwood. But they found an awful lot of gold in placer gold there. It was very rich.
So placer gold, for people, that's surface stuff. It's not, you don't go mine for it.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Placer gold. No, but was there ever any mining there? Were there shafts, or they just stuck to the surface?
Yeah. Well, the surface, and then of course there was a lot of alluvium, gravel and sand, and they would dig down to what was bedrock in that area. But the gold itself wasn't coming from where Deadwood actually is. It was coming from another town, a couple, not more than 2 miles, mile or 2 miles to the south, which is now called Lead, South Dakota. And that's where they found the what you would call the hard rock, the actual gold within the veins and in the rock. And they started mining there I want to say 1877, 78 in that area. The Manuel brothers did that, and they were eventually bought out by Hearst, and he named it the Homestake Mine. And Homestake has been, well, it's closed now, but it was one of the top producers in the world. I think it was like the fifth richest, taking out the fifth richest amount of gold in the world for a while there.
And was this the publishing family Hearst?
Yes. Yeah.
And which one was it? Do you remember?
Which George Hearst was the one that bought it.
Oh, okay.
And then Randolph was his son.
Right. Okay.
And so the Hearst family had it, all the way through, a portion of it all the way through time. And just recently, back in the, I guess, early 2000s, a company called Barrick out of Canada bought it. They mined there for a couple of years, and then they closed it down. I used to work for the South Dakota Environmental Agency, and I got a couple opportunities to go down in the mine to do some inspections. And it's over a mile deep.
Oh.
And got to go all the way to the bottom, so that was kind of fun. But I figured I'd never want to work down there, that's for sure, because it's pretty hot.
Wow. I would think it'd be a little chilling, too. It'd be a mile deep, but I'm not one to think mining would be fun.
Are they still mining it now, or is it?
No, it's not. It's not mine. It's closed now. But what's interesting is it's been repurposed. It's a national laboratory now for researching for minute particles like neutrinos and quarks and all those things that I think there's the Fermi lab outside of Chicago, and they shoot tiny particles through the earth to each other, and all kinds of interesting experiments going on, because apparently it's so deep that cosmic rays from space can't penetrate down there. So
interesting.
Yeah, conducting a lot of experiments. So that's good that, they're using it for something else.
No more gold, though. The gold is all mined out and gone. Is that right?
No, you know what? There's still a lot of gold there, but they just figured that it's so in areas that's just not economically feasible to get it out.
Yeah.
So that's why they shut it down.
Well, it's funny because you see these mines where they go back to the tailings, and they, because the new technology, sometimes the tailings are richer than the new ore. So anyway, we're over time. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back. Alan, I was over at the shoeing area yesterday, and our shoer was busy shoeing, and we were going over inventory, and we were low on some golden wings, which are of course these revolutionary one-of-a-kind plastic shoes that we use, and so I've got to get with Fred real quick, because these shoes are so instrumental with some of our horses being able to stay out on those trails, go up the mountains like they were this morning, and they absorb concussion. They're flexible, so they're far more like a natural situation without those steel horseshoes on. Still have their place.
When they first came out, you weren't quite as high on them, but you've elevated your appreciation of them since.
100% right. In general, plastic shoes that we'd used before, it all failed. Every last one of them. They whether they were glue on, nail on, whatever they were, they never worked. Fred tells me he worked 15 years to make these things happen, and I always call out my friend Barb. She's winning mounted shootings on a horse she'd retired.
Really?
And Golden Wings brought that horse out of retirement.
That's
and she
cool.
proudly shows one of her many buckles to me every time I see her because of those shoes.
That's cool. All Mark.
Well, I don't think you can talk about Deadwood or the Black Hills and not at least talk about Wild Bill Hickok, of course. And he died there. How did he die?
Okay. Well, Wild Bill was in Deadwood, kind of to start it was a new beginning for him, and he had excuse me, he showed up there, I want to say mid-July. He had been married to a circus owner, Agnes Lake, in March. They had a romance going on for years, and they finally tied the knot in Cheyenne in March. And so Agnes and Wild Bill actually wanted to get enough money that they could buy a ranch, and she could raise horses, and he could do whatever he wanted to. He was not one of these people that searched for the limelight like Buffalo Bill did. He kind of ran from it. So he was going to Deadwood to try to make enough money through prospecting and gambling to be able to, with Agnes, buy that ranch. And she was going to actually join him later on in the year. So gets to Deadwood, sets up camp with Charlie Utter and a couple other friends there. And there's a saloon called Saloon Number 10 that he knew the owner of Saloon Number 10, and the owner told him, hey, make this your headquarters when you come into town. So that's what it was. And so Buffalo Wild Bill was in town one evening, and he was playing cards with several people, and one of them was a guy by the name of Jack McCall, and Wild Bill called him on his stash that he had. Back in the day, there wasn't actually a lot of actual physical hard currency in Deadwood. Everybody had little poke sacks filled with gold dust, and the bartenders would keep that behind the bar, and they'd weigh how much gold was actually in the poke. And Wild Bill thought that Jack McCall had overplayed his hand in that he didn't have enough money to cover his bets. Called to the bartender, and the bartender said, yeah, he doesn't have enough money. And so that was the end of the game for Jack McCall, and he was out of money. He said he could reimburse Hickok later in the week. Wild Bill bought him a drink and gave him, I think it was like 10 cents, which doesn't sound like much, but it was big back in the day, for breakfast, and said, hey, if you need more, come see me and I'll take care of you. So that was that night. The next day, Wild Bill and his good friend Charlie Utter, they walk into Saloon Number 10. There's a card game going on in there, the owner and a few other guys, and they invite Hickok to the game. And so he has always sat with his back to the wall. And that's true, because he had several instances in the past where people had sneaked up behind him and got the draw on him or attacked him or whatever. So he always tried to sit with his back to the wall. Well, in this instance, they all kind of good-naturedly said, come on, it's all right. Nobody's going to shoot you. He sits down where he can't see what's coming up behind him. Jack McCall comes into the bar, stands back by the bar. Hickok's good friend Charlie Utter had been sitting behind him on a stool. And little aside, there were no chairs in Deadwood at the time. They were all stools, no chairs. So if you ever see a painting with chairs, it's inaccurate. So Charlie says, hey, I'm going to go get lunch. Gets up, leaves. McCall sees that it's his time. He can get in there. Comes up back behind Wild Bill and shoots him in the back of the head. And the bullet passes through his jaw and hits, I think it was Captain Massey, in his hand and his wrist. And he thought Wild Bill had shot him, and he ran out into the street saying, "Wild Bill has shot me," and everybody else is running out. In the meantime, there weren't too many people in the saloon at the time. Jack Paul, was a cap and ball pistol. We have to, got to pull the trigger back and then fire with caps. And all of his he was shooting at people, but all of his caps were misfiring. So fortunately for everyone else, his gun misfired. So he ran out the back. There was a horse tied to a hitching post there. And this is a good lesson for everybody. He jumped up into the saddle, but he didn't check his cinch first, and the saddle swung under the belly of the horse. And so then he had to start running down the street, and mob captured him, and they're going to hang him on the spot, but cooler heads prevailed. And then they had a trial for him in town, and he claimed that Hickok had shot his brother. And everybody said, "Oh, okay." So they let him go. There's no law in town. I mean, they had to put basically a minors' court together. How am I doing on time? I don't want to.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. So anyway, they let him go, and he rides off because some of Hickok's friends want to take care of him. And he gets down to, I think, Laramie, and he's bragging that he killed Hickok, and they actually didn't have a brother. And law enforcement arrested him, and then he sent him to Yankton, Dakota Territory. And they tried him again, and they tried him again because they said that the first court was not a lawful court. And so he was tried in Yankton. He claimed that there were other people involved, that he had been paid to assassinate Wild Bill Hickok by a guy named Johnny Varnes. And they sent deputies to Deadwood to find Varnes, but he had already left town. And so they figured, well, we got McCall anyway. And so they said, yeah, guilty. And then they hanged him and buried him in the Catholic graveyard there with the noose still around his neck. So, and they dug him up years later because they had to move the cemetery and open the coffin, and the noose was still around his neck.
Worms hadn't gotten the noose, huh?
Yeah. So one of the, like I said, had stools. There was no chairs because everything had to come into Deadwood by wagon. So if you have stools, you can, basically stack them together, or telescope them together in the back of a wagon, where a regular chair would take up more room. And, space was a premium back in the day then. And so that's one of the things to look for when you see anything. The other thing is people talk about the dead man's hand. And that, if I could, I want to read you something real quick, and I'll let you decide. There was an author in 1926, Frank Wilstach, who wrote the book Wild Bill Hickok, The Prince of the Pistoliers. And he got a letter to put in his book from a guy from the Black Hills. His name was Doc Pierce. And he was a so-called doctor. I guess he'd taken a few courses at a college in Pennsylvania or something like that. So, but he was also a barber and, you name it, everything else. Anyway, he was asked to help take care of Hickok's body after he'd been killed. And so after Hickok was killed, they locked up saloon number 10 so nobody could go in. So Pierce was one of the first people to go in. And so I'll just read this little part of the letter. So this is the letter. When they unlocked the door for me to get his body, he was lying on his side with his knees drawn up just as he slid off the stool. We had no chairs in those days, and his fingers were still crimped from holding the poker hand. Charlie Rich, that was one of the guys playing in the game. Charlie Rich, who sat beside him, said he never saw a muscle move. Bill's hand read aces and eights, 2 pair, and since that day, aces and eights have been known as the dead man's hand in Western country. So end of his letter. But the thing is that Doc Pierce was a noted, I guess the comment says he was a rare character known for being a practical joker in the Black Hills. So no one else ever talked about the dead man's hand. So the only one that talked about it was a guy noted as a practical joker. So you can decide whether you want to believe in the dead man's hand or not.
So I ask you two questions. A, do you believe yes or no? And was it a full house, aces and eights, or two pair? I thought it was full house.
Two. Well, yeah, it's two aces and two eights, and no one knows what the other card was.
Oh, okay. I always assumed wrongly.
Yeah.
Do you believe it?
You know what? I don't.
Okay. And number two, where do you come down on the conspiracy theory? Was it just an angry Jack McCall or something?
No, I think
wider?
He was paid. I think he was paid. There's a lot of I can't get into it here, but it's in one of my books.
Which book?
It's in Standoff at High Noon. Kellen Cutsforth, my co-author, and I, we debate back and forth various Old West controversial stories.
Right.
And I take the side that there was a conspiracy, and he says, no, there wasn't. But what's interesting is that, everybody in town was saying, yeah, that the jury was paid off to give him not guilty verdict. He even claimed people said that he claimed that he was paid like $200 in gold up front and then $300 after the fact. So just a lot of and
it's a lot of money
Johnny
if a
Varnes,
dime will buy you breakfast.
Yeah, and this guy Johnny Varnes, he had two altercations with Hickok earlier before this. That Hickok had caught him, cheating somebody and drew his revolver on him to make him pay it back. And so he had one instance, I believe, in Cheyenne, and then an earlier instance in Deadwood. So I don't know. I think there was a conspiracy.
So name of the book again that goes into detail?
Oh, and that one, that is Standoff at High Noon.
Standoff at High Noon.
Yeah, and that one has 10 chapters with 10 different controversial stories. I think we talked about Butch Cassidy's Sundance Kid really died in Bolivia, and the innocence of Tom Horn, and a few other things.
Well, and you guys are great together. I love that.
Yeah, we're good friends, and it's fun to try to.
Those are great fable tales or whatever they are. I love to read those events.
Super.
Yeah.
So, Deadwood, the show.
Right.
Controversial when it came out. I had a friend who just was outraged because of all their language, and of course it's defended by the fact that was historically correct, and that was the way they acted, and that's the way they spoke. How do you come down on that show?
Well, it's kind of funny. My wife and I, for those that don't know, we live about roughly 3 hours from Deadwood. So we go there a lot. And so we went out and we actually subscribed to HBO at the time. We never had it, just to watch Deadwood. And I was so angry, seeing it because, they just played fast and loose with the history and, the language. Yeah. You think about it, people didn't talk that way in those days. Maybe some did when they weren't around, when they weren't in polite society or whatever. But that was one of the reasons why people, thought Calamity Jane was something else, because she swore, and that a lot of people didn't do that at the time. And even what's the guy's name? Milch, was it David Milch, the director or whatever? He said he had thrown the foul language in as a shock factor. So they didn't talk that way. And
so it wasn't. One of our longtime guests played the dude in that, and he still comes Timothy Amundsen, and do you remember that character? He got
he played Seth Bullock.
Yeah, and they called him the Dude, so it was sort of perfect. So
and
the swearing's not real.
The Chinese was bad, and
so talk about that, the Chinese thing.
Oh, the Chinese. If people have not been to Deadwood, it's a long, skinny town. It's in the bottom of a gulch, and so everybody is pretty much thrown together there. In fact, somebody wrote a book called Ethnic Oasis because everybody is thrown together. Asians and blacks and whites, and everybody is together. So in Deadwood, that show, they portrayed the Chinese as being these evil people that would, throw bodies to the hogs and that sort of thing. And that just didn't happen. It didn't happen in Deadwood. And I wrote
pretty graphic though when it was on TV.
Oh yeah. But
I forgot about
it. It wasn't real. It didn't happen. Not in that town, maybe somewhere else, but not there, because everybody would have known about it. But there was a lot of good people. It was people mixed together when there were like Chinese funerals. I mean, everybody in town was invited, and it was like a big procession. And I don't want to say party, but I mean, they'd have bands playing and go up to Mount Moriah, and everybody was involved. And I'm friends with some of the Chinese descendants from Deadwood, and they're just great people, and the early pioneers of the Black Hills. So so I wrote an article for True West magazine debunking the HBO series on their portrayal of the Chinese.
Interesting. Yeah, well, True West's our favorite magazine, of course, with Bob Bosbell and Stuart Rosebrook over there.
And unfortunately, if you don't know this, Wild West magazine is done, no longer out there.
I didn't know that. No kidding.
Yeah, email just went out today saying that they'd stopped production of the physical magazine and the online, and laid off
that
9
makes
people.
Me sad.
Well, magazines are a tough business to be in. You go to Deadwood a lot. What's it like today? What do people find?
It's a fun town. I've got a lot of friends in Deadwood. There's the Deadwood that everybody sees when they come to town to go gambling and that sort of thing. But, if you get away from the gambling, there's a lot of really cool historical things in town to do. And a lot of good people live there. And I like it. It's one of my favorite towns.
I have not been, but I need to get there. Yeah. Well, Bill, I know you've got quite a bit coming up. Can you give us a rundown?
Oh, sure. Well, as I said, I'll be at the White Stallion Ranch if anybody wants to talk to me.
They will.
From Sunday, March 3rd through Thursday, March 7th. Myself and some other authors, Chris and Sherry Monahan and Preston Lewis, we're going to be speaking Tuesday in Sun City at their retirement facility there. Then that same afternoon, we'll be at the Green Valley Library from 1:30 to 3:30. And then in Sierra Vista on Thursday, March 7th at Get Lit Books from 5:30 to 7:30. Then we'll be in Tombstone Friday, March 8th, all day at the Schifflin Hall there for the Tombstone Book Festival. And then finally, Saturday, March 9th and Sunday, March 10th, we'll be at the Tucson Book Fest, and I'll be at the Ladies and Amigos of the West booth, which is number 129. And then I start driving home.
And Bill, because you've got a lot of books, and some of them include Deadwood, and we've got Standoff at High Noon, and is there one place that they can go to find out about your books?
They can go to my website, which is it's pretty easy if you remember my name. If the person remembers my name, it's www.billmarkley.com, and it's all put. Bill Markley is all together in one.
And that's Markley. Bill,
Right.
Markley.com.
Yeah, and all my books are on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and any of those online stores, or you can order it through your local bookstore.
And a great book that we've talked about in the past, and two really huge figures is Wild Bill Hickok and Buffalo Bill Cody, Plainsmen of the legendary West. We didn't even talk about that today. And Buffalo Bill. I do a little thing at the rodeo. I'll say, who's never heard of Buffalo Bill? Unless it's an 8-year-old from Bulgaria, there no hands go up. Everybody has heard of Buffalo Bill, and he's been dead 107 years or whatever it is. So great books. Thank you. And we look forward. We're going to see you soon.
Well, thanks. Thank you. Thanks for having me on again. It's always fun.
Good luck with your cold.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Families and dude ranches, that's what people think of when they think of dude ranches. And of course, White Stallion Ranch is no different. Outdoor activities, there's all kinds of things to do together. Horseback riding, rock climbing, archery, shooting, hiking, tennis, basketball, horseshoes, swimming pool, hot tub. I don't know if you do spa services together, but we've got those. And of course, the game room with all those games and evening entertainment. Families really get together and enjoy that. But one of the great experiences is giving the kids a bit of independence, and you can't really absorb that until you experience it. And watching your kid run off with a bunch of other kids to go off on a ride without you, or playing games after dinner, or going, hey, Mom, Dad, we're heading over to the game room, see you at dinner. It's just not too many places you get to do that. And people my age, we had a bit of history with that, but the world today, it's a bit different. I think most importantly, the families leave with that memory of really truly experiencing a vacation, and a pretty varied vacation, all together, and with all those experiences shared, sometimes together, most of the time together, but not always. And everybody finding something they really enjoy. So whitestallion.com, all the information, the website's pretty extensive, and you can call 888-977-2624, or most easily whitestallion.com. Alan, it's so much fun talking to Bill Markley, because he's one of those authors that they're bringing the part of the world that we love and the history of it to the public. And, without these dedicated guys and women, certainly, guys being generic, these people work so hard doing the research and telling these stories. It just, it's a big deal.
Well, it makes me glad to do what we do, because we get to rub elbows with that and hear it from the source, and I just appreciate that. I like being a part of it.
Well, folks, that's a wrap from the West, where history never ceases to amaze. Hats off to Stan Houston's talented production company, and thank you, Greg Hager, for sharing your song Eights and Aces, a little twist on Wild Bill Hickok's last card game. Next week, mystery authors C.J. Box and Shannon Baker join the Cowboys. Until then, I'm Lynn Weezy Sneed, reminding you to sit tall, ride safe, and give a listen to Eights and Aces.
In my hands are eights and aces, worried looks on all their faces. Well, will I lose or will I win? I think of Hickok once again. I Think of how his mama cried. I think about the way he died. How Jack McCall, he played his hand. The dead man's hand we can understand. Folded there inside each other, they will never hold another. We all understand the dead man's hand. You sometimes lose, you sometimes win. Some hands you cannot play again. Sometimes the one you play can cost your soul. And you will join the ace that's in the hole. Seems I've dropped my eights and aces. They've all risen from their places. Well, did I lose or did I win? I think of Hickok once again. I wonder if my mama's crying. I can't believe I'm here just dying. The way I must have played my hand. The dead man's hand we can understand. Folded there inside each other, they will never hold another. We all understand the dead man's hand. Sometimes lose, you sometimes win. Some hands you cannot play again. Sometimes the one you play can cost your soul. And you will join the ace that's in the hole. Game of life is sometimes rough, and sometimes they call your bluff. Folded there inside each other, they will never hold another. We all understand the dead man's hand. Sometimes lose, you sometimes win. Some hands you cannot play again. Sometimes the one you play can cost your soul. And you will join the ace that's in the hole. You sometimes lose, you sometimes win. Some hands you cannot play again. Sometimes the one you play can cost your soul. And you will join the ace that's in the hole. And you will join the ace that's in the hole.